Okay. Hopefully everyone can hear me. And good afternoon. My name is Chen, and it's nice to see you guys again in the end of the semester. And the school is going to end this semester is going to end in 2 weeks. And this is our final chance to reach our EMI teaching technique. And today is our honor to invite both Kelley and Nate to give a talk about assessment application using evaluation to inform teaching and learning. I know it's a little bit late for just evaluation in the end, but maybe in the future we still can use those techniques. And so this is also the last talk Kelley and Nate will be given for our school. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And so we're gonna start with Kelley, and then later Nate will take the second half of the class.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today as well. We know you're very busy, and so we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to meet with us. So yeah, today, as he mentioned, our topic today is assessment applications using evaluations to inform teaching and learning. And I'm Kelley MacArthur Bodwell. If you don't know me, I've been here in Taiwan since August. I've really enjoyed being in Taiwan. It's the easiest country I've ever lived in and probably ever will live in, including the United States. So it's been such a joy to be here and be amongst all of you and to witness just the incredible learning that has been going on here. My background is in education, so I have a master's in education from Johns Hopkins University, and then I have a master's of applied linguistics from Ohio University. And so before this, I was in North Africa, in Algeria. I was doing teacher training there for 2 years, teaching pre-service and in-service teachers. And then before that, I was in Washington, D.C., teaching in the public schools there. And then before that, I was in Ohio, teaching international students, teaching English for specific purposes, English for academic purposes, and then also teaching some incoming Fulbright scholars. So yeah, it's such a joy to be here and such an honor to really get to experience this culture and this the education system here. Okay, so what we have on our menu today, I'm going to go over formative and summative assessments. Yeah, that is my main goal for us today. And then Nate will be going over technology and assessment interference, and then why you might want to cut that interference. And then we have some classroom applications for you as well, which again, we do know it's the end of the semester, but hopefully you can take this with you and you will feel hopeful, like you don't even have to do this yet, you know? And so maybe you can feel free and you know, happy to think about how you might apply it in the future after you've had a long break. Okay, so our objectives for you today are that you would be able to identify effective formative and summative assessments for your classrooms, and you'd be able to evaluate whether an assessment is effective or not. Okay, so we're going to do a quick warm-up. Hold on, let me show. I got to switch my screen. I'm going to use Mentimeter. So we're going to do a quick warm-up. You're going to do an emoji introduction. This is our icebreaker. So you are going to pick 3 emojis that best capture you as a professor. And so you'll think about what makes your teaching unique, how would your students describe you, and a fun or creative way to represent your field of expertise. And so if anyone would feel brave after doing that, we can also share and talk about it a little bit. So for instance, you might choose this little guy in front of a chalkboard. If you like to be a lively lecturer, you might have these different masks, like, oh, sorry, the books. Yeah, the books, like you're learning new things and you're ready to, okay, wait, hold on. I switched these around, these examples. But you can, you know what, you can interpret it however you want. Okay, so you can just come up with some different emojis. Hold on, let me change the screen. Okay, so you're just gonna use, here we are. Okay, all right. So you can, oh, are these yours, Nate? You chose yours? Okay, so you can scan the QR code or go to menti.com and just choose 3 emojis that represent you. as a professor or a lecturer. And I'll give you about 3 minutes to do that. Oh, wow, we have a lot of good responses. Okay. Okay. So yeah, whatever, we have a variety of options for how you can submit your answers. So, yeah, I like that. I know some of your background. We have a cybersecurity professor. I'm super interested in cybersecurity for some reason. It's like my side passion. It's very strange of me. But yeah, teaching EMI, that's great. Would anyone like to share? I see mind blown emoji, clown emoji, kiss face. Anybody want to share? Anybody have ideas about what this represents for you? Okay, I can share first. I did this one right here. And so I have a little woman with a tool. So I like my classrooms to be, very active. My students should be like doing something. And then I have a sparkly emoji because I want my students to I want to spark like passion and joy amongst my students. And then I have a brain because I hope to include more like metacognitive, higher order thinking strategies in my classrooms. The moon?
Yeah.
Okay, that's you.
Yeah, I actually am trying to find out two faces. So
You tried to find what?
like a two mask or something like that, but I cannot find it, so I decided to use that one. So for both, one shining side and one dark side. So yes, so just like for this, I think I just I know no one between me that I'm introvert.
Okay, yeah.
But I have to pretend like introvert
Yeah.
when I teaching. So it's like took me a lot of effort to do it. So it's like the next one is sweating right now.
Sweating. Okay, yeah.
But I think at the end of the semester
You're like doing a dance.
Yeah.
At the end of the semester.
Yeah.
Perhaps many of us feel that way. Yeah.
I can go back to introverts.
Okay, and you can go back. You hibernate in the summertime. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I saw you nodding your head back here. Would you like to share your in agreement? Yeah, yes. No, it's okay. No pressure, no pressure. I saw you in agreement with him. What?
Share my
If you're willing. If you're
Yes.
Okay. Which ones were yours? Here?
the first column, the second row.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, actually, the first one is also mine. was not sure about what we are going to do, so I typed my profession and then I typed this one.
Okay.
And this means that when students have a question, has a problem, and I say, well, yes, good question. I have no idea. Let's work it out. So the third one is a thumbs up, means that we kind of working together to figure it out.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Collaborative learning. We love it. That's beautiful. Okay. Anybody else want to share? Nobody's making eye contact with me. Okay, I like this one. What's this? Ghost? Is this like your students are ghosting you or something? Pointing. Nobody's going to take credit for it. I'm very curious. Okay. Anyone? Maybe let's do one final one. Dr. Solution to share. Which one did you do?
Only word.
Okay, that's okay. No worries.
Because I am not quickly to choose
That's
the
okay.
icon. Yes, I type the word. So patient, enjoy, and interesting.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I think I'm enjoy to prepare the EMI class, and it's interesting the activity for my class.
You want to create interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And I also enjoy and feel interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
What about you're passionate about?
Patient, because I like teaching students through English, because I hope they can also can enjoy to try to use the English in the class.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you
Yes,
so much
thank
for
you.
sharing. Thank you. Okay, thank you to our brave participants. Okay, so yeah, that was just our warm up. Okay, so let's see. So formative and summative assessments. I'm sure this will be overview for many of you. And so we're just going to go through real quick. So the purpose, right, of a summative assessment is that you would find out how much students have learned at the end of a course or a unit. So probably you're all getting ready to do your summative assessments if you're not doing them already with your students. And so these are generally high stakes related to grades, related to their final grade, product and performance oriented, with the purpose being to see what students know. And then the examples include papers, presentations, exams, projects. Sometimes you only have one of these in, the semester or two. And so these are summative, right? It just means like the summary of the course. But then formative is to find out how the students are learning, how their learning is progressing in class or throughout a course. And so these are often lower stakes, okay? And it's high engagement. So this is to determine in every single class how, you know that students are learning the materials. And so it'll inform you as the instructor on what topics are difficult or for students, what kind of gaps of knowledge they have and what you need to fill in. And then it also promotes peer work, okay? And so it promotes students interacting with one another, interacting with you. But then the purpose is really assessment. So when we think about, I want my students to talk more, what we're saying is we want our students to demonstrate what they know and what they don't know more regularly. And so, formative assessments include, I don't know if any of you have been in any of my, everyone knows I love a chart. Okay, so I'll show you a chart of these different types of assessments based on time. So I know that you all have limited time and you have a lot of content to get through. So we have this fewer than 5-minute time commitment, 5 to 10-minute time commitment, and then a 15 to 30-minute time commitment that this would take in your classes depending on the amount of time you have. If you've come to some of my prior workshops, you might have noticed that these are often, I repeat these many times, in many different ways, because we can, if we talk about engagement, we talk about students being more active in class, and we talk about these formative assessments, they all go together, okay? And so in this fewer than 5 minute time commitment, you could do things like polls or quick quizzes, like using Mentimeter or Slido, things like that. You could have students do a 1 minute paper, and then you could extend that activity if you want, where they speak with a partner. So a 1 minute paper, I believe I'm going to highlight a few of these in the coming slides, but that's just where students will write about something for 1 minute straight, and they should write about it in the target language. So ideally they'd be writing about it in English if your target is English in your class. And then you could do simple hand gestures, right? Thumbs up, raise their hand. And this is a quick formative assessment to determine what do students know, what do they not know. You could do a Kahoot instead of something like this, especially if you have a large lecture, to gain, understanding. And this is more low. Students are not necessarily talking to one another in this fewer than 5 minute time commitment. This is like an individual activity. But then you have this 5 to 10 minute time commitment, something called Think, Pair, Share. How many people have done Think, Pair, Share this year in some capacity? Anybody? Raise your hand. 1, 2. Anybody? Okay, so I've noticed that it's a little more common here in Taiwan. And so I believe I might talk about that more in the coming slides. Think, Pair, Share. It's when students first think, then they share with one another, then they share out as a group. And so it's a scaffolded activity where students have more support. There's a progression of sharing, which is important in a society, in a culture perhaps, or in an education environment where students aren't as used to speaking as much. And then you can do a know, want to know, learn chart. And that's, is anybody familiar with that? A know, want to know, learn chart. We would call it a KWL chart. And so that's something I would do very often with my students. When I was in Algeria in particular, we would do it every single class. So it would be like, okay, today we're learning about pedagogical methods, or we're learning about, some sort of technique. And I would say, what do you know about it? So we'd have a chart at the beginning of class. What do you know? The students would all write it down individually, and then they would write what they want to know about that topic that day. So that's gaining, it's almost like a diagnostic test. So you're like figuring out what do they already know, and then at the end of class, and then you would write it down as a group. So you can actually combine these two things. You can have students also share with a partner after they write down what they know, and then we share out as a class, and I would record what they know and what they want to know. And then by the end of class, I could see, did we learn the things that we wanted to know? And that also, I think, it helps students. It's also a metacognitive strategy where they are determining, what do I already know? They're thinking about their own thinking. And then it maybe gets them to have more buy-in. Like, let's see if my professor can deliver on the things that I want to know. And so it kind of engages them more in the learning process. And then a stop and jot is very simple. It's just where you just might have them stop and think and write or draw something based on what they're learning in the middle of class. And these are like mid engagement practices, right? Here we have less engagement, but here we have a little bit more. And then the 15 to 30 minute time commitment is a lot of engagement, much engagement. Okay, so we have something called a jigsaw activity. And I know one person in this room has done this before in an EMI class. I'm not gonna make you share about that or anything, but I know it can be done. Okay, has anyone else done a jigsaw activity here in Taiwan? So this is something where students work in groups. And it's almost like a flipped classroom approach where they have to learn about a topic. They go to these like expert groups, they talk amongst themselves, and they come back to their original group and they explain it. They have to explain it to their group members. So the idea of jigsaw is a puzzle. So it's like maybe they're learning about a really complex topic. You break it down into different topics. You have them learn about that one topic as an individual in their group. They each have different topics. And anyway, yeah, so these are some things that we've talked about actually in our consultations with professors. And so these are the types of activities we can support you in and assist you in implementing them, because it's very effective. It's highly engaging for the students. It requires a lot of, it requires them to really know the material, but it does take more time. This is a 4 corners activity, which is what it sounds like. You have students go to different corners of the room, learn about different things, and then a gallery walk, which again, I know has been done here in Taiwan. And it's something where students get up, they learn about different, they contribute to different topics, they read each other's, and then it's very interactive. And so this is highly interactive, but it does take more time. But again, these are all, part of it is that you as the instructor get to really see the process of your students learning. And yeah, okay, so I'm going to highlight a little bit more each of these, or one of these from each of these time categories. Okay, so we have the fewer than 5 minute time commitment. So we have something called the 1 minute paper and speak out. So the definition of this is it's a short writing exercise students do at the end of class, okay, to explain what they learned during the session and perhaps include any questions they might still have. So you might say, okay, today we learned about this topic. You have 1 minute. You put a big timer on the projector. You give them 1 minute, and for 1 minute, they can't stop writing. Okay, they can't stop writing in English. Okay, and so then they write, and this is like also forcing them to produce language. And I think in EMI classes, this is really effective because EMI, the purpose is just the language. It's just for them to transmit the information, right? It means that they don't have to be perfect in the language. Of course, that's impossible anyway, even for native speakers. And so the idea is that you get them more comfortable in using language, even if it's in writing, right? So it forces them, you might give them points based on completion. Sometimes I would use this as an attendance activity. So I'd be like, okay, this is how, I'm going to, judge that you were here today. And so it gives them some of that motivation as well. And then you would collect them and see what your students understand, where they need clarification, what kind of gaps in knowledge they have. But it also helps the students clarify their own thoughts and allows you to have this quick informal assessment. Okay, and so you can also extend this activity and have students share with one another. And, again, it's that progressive type of activity where students first write and then they could speak. And so they have prepared. But again, it really can show you too what your students know. Okay. And so these are for different fields. You might have students, maybe if you're in electrical engineering, summarize the most important concepts. And maybe there was a particular formula or method you found confusing. And I think, sometimes professors have said to me, well, my students will say they found nothing confusing, even if they did, right? They're not going to admit it. And so what I would say to students is you have to say one thing you want to know more about, right? That is part of the assignment. And so, gotta work it in there somehow. For management, you might have students describe one key idea they learned and how they might apply it in a real scenario, right? Or for computer science, for instance, you might say like, what was the most significant takeaway? What still feels unclear to you? So you can adapt it based on your field. And then we have this 5 to 10 minute time commitment, a think, pair, share. So I saw a couple people raise their hand for think, pair, share. Does anybody did you raise your hand for think, pair, share? Would you want to talk about maybe how you've implemented it in your class? Yeah, I'll talk about this and then I'll give you some time. So basically how it works is that, you have this topic or idea that's presented and it's either review or it's new information. And you have students have a moment to think and then write about their idea. Okay, and in Algeria, this was like students, it was the opposite problem of Taiwan, where students, it was like I had to all make them be silent. Like, we are not going to talk, okay? Here, maybe we have a different, a different challenge, okay? And so, but the idea is first we think, we write it down, and then you have students pair up, okay? And then you share it with your pair. Then, as the instructor, I would go around and I would say, okay, I would listen. And for some students who had really strong ideas, or maybe ideas that were confusing, that I thought a lot of students would find confusing, I would ask them directly, is it okay would you mind sharing that in the whole class? And they could say no. They have the option to say no, or they could say yes. And oftentimes they would say yes. So it prepares them to, have to share out in that big group. Is there anything you want to say about how you've implemented it? Okay. Yeah, I'm coming. Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah.
Well, after the midterm, we are starting to talk about how to count GSG protocol
basically is emission. So I actually downloaded 3 sustainable reports from different industry sectors. And these 3 reports actually using different framework. For example, TSMC using GHT protocol. However, there's a retail estate called Xingyi estate. They use the ISO system. Actually, this scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and sorry, this is too professional, but I ask students to form group in 4, and then I ask them to, I give them the guideline. I ask them to see what is the scope from the TSMC, for example, scope 1, and you can relate it to ISO system. And I also ask students to look at for example, what real estate they didn't count, because in the ISO system, they have so many categories. They have 6 categories, but not every category have the data. And some of students, they have to think about if they didn't count this CO2 emission, is this reasonable or not? So it actually, each course, we actually have a serious event and doing these things here.
Okay.
And I think, well, now students actually can really read how to read first sustainable report and then know why the report they want to write about that, and also think about critically why this data is missing or non-relevant. So basically, it's to training them to think like as a ESG analyst.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. That's very valuable. So I'm wondering too, so at the beginning when you were doing this, how many times have you done it with your students?
Well, the first time really takes a little bit long, because the first time when the students' concepts are not so solid, you have constantly reminding them. Sometimes they still mix at scope 1 and scope 2 and scope 3. So sometimes you have to remind them, no, think about that. And we need to use the chart again and to compare 2 systems together. So they will really, I think teachers need to have more patience, because sometimes students really need to, for them, they are super young. And then the second one, maybe this is the first time they really read the official report from the real industry or other sectors. And well, 3 is that they never thought about that is connect to what they know about CO2 emission. So just very patient, and then guide your student, give them more time. And then sometimes if I cannot finish this, I will see the situations about, and then I will make it as assignment. So they can come back, and the next week they can report that in the first maybe 10 minutes of the class, and then we can go on.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. So I think that progression is so crucial, right? And then when your students come to class, if they have to do this activity, I imagine that then they immediately know what will be expected of them and the format of this type of activity, I think, pair share. And so I think that's such a great example, and it's great that you were including authentic materials, and then it's preparing them for their future career. But then also, that's better that you would have them do that in class rather than have them do it one time or twice on a midterm and final exam or something. So I think that's a great example of using this as a formative assessment where, she could identify the gaps in knowledge and address that. And so I think I don't know, I'm sure other people have done similar things as well, but it's a great example. Okay, so we don't have to do that then because we just heard a real one. Okay, so then we have this 15 to 30 minute time commitment. And I included these activities: jigsaw activity, 4 corners activity, gallery walk, and I'm only going to go over the gallery walk activity. But I have a whole document that we could send out later that includes all of these information about all of these. And so this again does require more time. So a gallery walk, it's an interactive teaching strategy where students move around the classroom to observe and engage with various displays or stations set up with information, questions, problems, visual materials related to the lesson. And each station covers a different aspect or topic, and students are often asked to discuss, reflect, or answer questions. So I've done this in many, many classrooms with all levels of students, all ages, actually. I could have had you guys all do it today, but I didn't for some reason. Okay, and so basically what I really enjoy doing, and I'm a big proponent as well as low tech activities. I think sometimes that can switch it up, especially when students have to sit for a long time. So I'd give all my students Post-it notes. So maybe I would say, okay, there are 4 questions that we're gonna address today. And I would give them, they'd have to write one answer per Post-it, like for one question, they have one Post-it note, they write the answer, and they could do it anonymously. And then I'd have them get up and put the answers around the room. So you might ask them 4 critical questions that maybe they're going to discuss that day, or maybe it's like later, maybe midway through the lecture, you have them, you're like, okay, we're going to think about these more deeply, and then they get up and they post them on the boards, and then they read one another's answers, and then they can ask questions of each other, they can write down questions, and then you as the instructor, you go around. I always, when I would do this with students, I would always do it as well with them, because then they'd be like, oh my God, like my professor, she's also doing it, and then like, so it makes them a little more engaged, and then they're like, oh, I'm leaving comments, and they're like, oh, she's leaving, so I think it helps to like engage the students, but then we notice different themes, and sometimes things students will say are things like, oh, I didn't know everyone else thought this too. And so I think it helps to kind of build that classroom community as well. But then you can really identify students, their knowledge, and what's the gaps again in that knowledge. So this does require more work from you. You have to set up these stations, and then students do a lot of movement, and then you have this reflection and debrief. And so we have an example from a class that was done here at TST. And I can be corrected because we might have the person here with us. But my understanding is that this was in actually it wasn't in an EMI class, it was a Chinese language class, but it was, but still, this can be done within any type of classroom, okay? But it does work particularly well in EMI as well, because the students get that writing time. But my understanding is that, well, you know what, maybe, was it EMI? Correct me, was it an EMI class or no? It was not, okay, yeah. So the students were giving different presentations. Do you want to talk about it, or do you want me to talk about it? Okay, I can talk about it, okay. Yeah, okay. So the students were giving different presentations, and before the presentations, the students went and walked around, looked at each other's posters, so they each had a poster for their presentation. And then they would come up with questions that then they would later ask their classmates about the presentation. So they were kind of preparing to hear those presentations. And I don't know about you, but I know that as a prior student at one point, and then as an instructor, and as somebody who's observed instructors, I've been in many presentations where students are basically sleeping, and there's nothing for the students to do, and it's pointless for them to be there. And so this creates a more authentic, presentation experience for the students. They're more invested. They, maybe you would have them, part of their grade would be including that peer feedback, those questions for their classmates. And so hopefully they'd be more engaged. And so this was based on case studies. The students were presenting on case studies for a cybersecurity class, and they had to describe a tool they would use. So students walked around, looked at the information, and then asked questions. Is there anything you want to add about it? How did it go? Was it good? It was good. It was great. Yeah. And so this can be done definitely in your class. You can adjust it. It's a very adaptable activity. And so we can see that even, you can make it longer or shorter based on your needs, which is really great. Thank you. Thank you for letting us use this information. It's very helpful. Okay, so then we have summative assessments, which is, okay, so I'm curious. Let me check my time. Okay, all right. So I'm going to have you answer. I'm curious what types of summative assessments. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. I can do it. I got it. Okay. All right, so I'm curious what types of summative assessments you have used in your classroom to determine if students understand the course. So summative, again, is just a midterm or final that you might have given in your course to ensure students understand course content, or some type of final project. So I'll give you a few minutes to respond. Assignment. Term vouchers. Great. Midterm exam, final project presentation, quizzes, midterm exam, final exam, sometimes homework, term paper, formal paper exam, group presentations. Let me see. Second time extension, video presentation online. Interesting. Group presentation after project discussion, homework projects, and exam. Okay, so we can see these summative. So summative, again, is just, we can think of it as like a summary. So it's like a completion of units, like a midterm or final. So yeah, it's interesting to see all the different, the variety. So we have reports, you have papers, you have midterm, final exams, presentations. And we would think of homework. Homework's a little more like, it's more formative because homework is, you're gathering information, you know, but those are, it's very crucial as well. Poster presentation. And that's what I've noticed. And that's what I've done also, right? That you have this combination of exams, presentations, of group work, which is great. And I just wanted to kind of get a sense of what people are doing just to see what things are like for you. Thank you for sharing. Okay. All right. Let me see. Okay. All right. So just, okay. So just a quick, overview. So I like to do this with my students, actually. I would often talk about this briefly with my students and talk about the difference between an assessment and a test. And I think this can be a useful understanding for students to have. Again, it's kind of a metacognitive strategy to help them see, okay, an assessment, right, is a tool. It's a tool used to improve student learning. It's a means of evaluating proficiency. It includes feedback, and it may or may not be associated with a grade. So again, today we're talking about formative and summative assessments, but I put this in the summative assessment category because often tests are the only things that students think about as being valuable. And so I like to push them a little bit and help them to see that a test is just one type of assessment. Okay, and it's usually, and it has some of these elements. It's a means of evaluating proficiency, and it's usually associated with a grade. But again, it's just one type of assessment. And so hopefully when you get them thinking about that, and you get them thinking, okay, wait, actually, when I come to class and I'm doing these interactive activities, that's a type of assessment. It can be helpful for them to think, I think, more deeply about their own learning process. So that's just a quick note from myself. Okay, and so I'm going to go over these key concepts of assessments. And again, this will be kind of brief, and sometimes people say I'm like a fire hose of information. So I'll send you this information later, hopefully. And so we have these seven concepts. Usefulness. So these are the concepts that should be included in your summative assessments. This is what we want to make sure all of our assessments have, that they have usefulness, they have reliability, they have validity, they have practicality, they have washback into our classes, they are authentic, they have authenticity, and they have transparency. So this is the ideal goal, and of course we probably don't hit all of them, but it's the goal for the summative, the final, midterm final assessments that we give. Okay, so usefulness, what makes an assessment useful? So it should have a clear defined purpose, and it must be appropriate for the students it targets, the skills it intends to measure, and the context in which it is used. So for example, an example is instead of giving a multiple choice exam on definitions, you could use a design brief or applied calculation task, right? So the idea is we want to be asking ourselves as the creator of an assessment, is this test giving you, the instructor, the right information to make instructional decisions in your class? So is the test actually, is it useful for you in being able to teach in your class? Or is it just kind of forcing students to memorize information? So we want to think, is the test actually useful for me as the instructor? And then reliability, okay? So it should yield consistent results over time. You should be able to give that test to students multiple times, ideally like an experiment, and you would get the same result, right? So we could think of our test as like a type of experiment. So we have many threats to this, like score variability, depending on who's scoring the exams. Unclear directions can be a big barrier, right? If you do not have clear directions, students can answer incorrectly even if they know the answer. And then fluctuating test conditions, which we cannot control. If students are very tired, or, there's a downpour, and so now they're soaked, or, there's no air conditioning. Those are things we can't control, but we can control these two things. And so we can improve this with rubrics. We can improve reliability with rubrics, with clear instructions, and with practice scoring sessions for the people who are scoring the exam. So if you have multiple raters, you could have a norming session where you ensure, okay, we have the rubrics as the raters, we have the rubrics, and we're all scoring the students correctly, which is very important. So we want to think about, would students score similarly if the tests were taken again, just like an experiment? Okay, and so then we have validity. Are you testing what you think you are testing? Early on in my teaching career, my manager, she would tell me, when you are giving a test, you take the test first as the instructor, which is always, I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to take my own test. That's like so boring. Oh, it's terrible. But it's a good test to see, am I actually, okay, the answers that I gave, how would I grade myself? Am I giving the answers that I'm looking for? And so, we should be measuring the intended skill or knowledge in our assessments. And so we want to avoid confounding factors. So what do I mean by that? I mean, okay, so if you're testing student circuit analysis, but you ask them to hand draw a diagram, you might actually be testing their drawing skills, right? And so we want to have a blueprint. We want to have alignment with learning objectives to ensure this validity, that we're actually testing what we want to test. If I'm asking students to speak about something when I've had them the whole semester practice writing about it, those might be different skills. So we want to think about that. And so you want to ask, does this assessment measure what it's supposed to measure for this course, for this level, for this learner? Okay, let me double check. Okay. And then we have practicality. So this is all great. That's fine. We can have all these elaborate tests that are so whatever authentic. We'll talk more about that. But is it practical to administer for you? Is it practical to score these exams? And is it practical resource-wise? Do you have the resources to do it? And so we have to consider, right, the time and the cost of these exams, these assessments, the technology or staffing requirements of those assessments, and the marking burden. Am I going to create a lot of work for myself additionally that I won't have time for? And then that will, in turn, maybe cause frustration for students, because then you don't give them feedback on something they worked really hard on. And so we want to think about this washback as well, the effects on learning and teaching. So if you have a very authentic, assessment, right? And then the washback could be that it promotes learning. It aligns with objectives, that the students are really practicing what they're learning. They're doing something really, genuine, and they're, it's almost like they're in the field, right? And that can motivate the students to be like, wow, I really enjoy this field. I want to participate in this class. But sometimes a negative washback can be that maybe you just taught to the test, or you just required students to memorize, and it can stifle that learning. And I'm sure we've all been there when we just memorized things and we forgot it and it didn't have any application to our life. And so we can encourage positive washback with timely feedback, giving students feedback really quickly, but then aligning the assessment tasks with course activities. And so we can ask ourselves, how does this test influence classroom teaching and student behavior? Okay, so we just have 2 more to go. Oh, somehow it's, no. That's okay, no worries. And then we have authenticity, so real world relevance. So tasks should mirror real life language use. Oh, I've given myself some tongue twisters today. Okay, so it should mirror real life language use and real life career application when possible, right? So we know that this is within reason. But if we can do this, it can both boost motivation and perceived value of learning. For example, like having student poster presentations rather than having students take a written exam only, right? Which many of you mentioned. I used to teach a business English class, and we'd work with an actual local business, and the final presentation was the business owner would come and listen to their presentation. So it was like high motivation. And sometimes the business owner would implement the student suggestions that they would give. And so it was such an authentic activity. And I think the students felt very internally motivated by that. And so I know that professors here are doing similar things. I've been to some of those classes. And so I think as authentic as we can make it, when it's feasible for us, when it's practical, right, the better. And so does it reflect how students will use this knowledge in real context? That's a very important question, especially for EMI, right? Are they really using that language practically? Okay, this was the class. I was consulting with the professor here at NTUST. She had a machine learning class where the students were, they gave lots of presentations. She had them go to the lab and see one of the machines they were working with and talking about in class. And then for their final presentation, they had to give these poster presentations. And they were in different groups, and we went around and we were the raters. And it mimicked kind of like a conference that students might go to, and they had these professional posters that were printed. And I think even the atmosphere, you could feel it felt very exciting. The students were peer reviewing one another. And so this is just a little video, but I won't play it now because I think we don't have time, so it's fine. Okay, let me see. Oh, but it's gonna play. Should I play it? It's only... Okay, we can play it.
Only 1 minute.
Why not? Let's have a little fun, you know? Okay, so I think it really displays like the whole progression, right? So she had the students go to these different places, see the actual machines that they were learning about, and then also she had them do a lot of presentation practice. And then I was there. I helped her. She came to some of our consultations, and we worked together to create those rubrics for her student presentations. And then we did the same for the final presentation. We worked together to create the rubrics. And so I'm very grateful for Dr. Gao for letting her be part of that, let me be part of the process of creating those activities for her students. And a lot of her students reported that seeing those machines helped to really connect. They really understood more deeply. It allowed them to speak more about what they were learning. And yeah, it was very fun for them as well. I think it was more fun, right? So yeah, I just wanted to display that's happening here at NTUST, and I'm sure you guys are doing amazing things in your classrooms as well. So okay, so our final concept is transparency. So there should be clarity for all participants. And so this means that students need to know what skills they will be assessed on and how they will be assessed and the criteria for success, how they can succeed. And this can help reduce anxiety and increase fairness. And we know, I'm sure as prior learners, but also as instructors, that, we know that if students are very nervous and anxious, it doesn't always really reflect, their responses don't always reflect what they really know. So we want to reduce that anxiety and increase fairness for students. And so this can mean sharing rubrics and practice items in advance with students. And something I like to do is to have the students, we really look at the rubrics together. They can evaluate an exam perhaps from the past or a mock exam that I've given. And sometimes I also like to have time for students to create test questions. And I will say, I might choose some of these questions for your exam. So that can help them think more deeply about what do I think I need to know from this course and what would be fair to be asked about. And you can give them criteria for that as well, but to involve them somehow in the assessment process can be a better way to really motivate them and increase that authenticity, increase just the practicality of it for yourself, but then also make it more meaningful for the students. So yeah, all right. I believe it's break time. Okay.
It's so nice to see you here today. There are many faces in the audience that I recognize, that are familiar. I've seen you in some of my workshops. I've even seen you in consultations. So I'm going to say welcome, Juanini. Thank you for coming. So in the second half today, I'm going to be talking about one of the specific principles of tests and exams and assessments that Kelley just presented to you. And that is going to be we'll come back to that in 1 second. Let me first introduce myself. As some of you maybe already know me, my name is Nate Fifield. I have a master's in TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages from California State University, Los Angeles. And I also have a background in STEM. I took many chemistry, science, mathematics courses because I have a bachelor's degree in geology and environmental science. At this point, I have 8 years of experience teaching both kids, adults, community college classes in the United States as well. And I am one of your local, friendly neighborhood EMI advisors here at NTUST. And I wonder who that handsome guy is. No idea. That's me. Of course. Okay, so I want to brainstorm with you for just a minute about some things that maybe you've been seeing in your classes. Okay, I'm sure that we've all seen it. I'm sure that we've all used it. But ChatGPT, right? It's here and it's here to stay. So the question I have for you that I want you to discuss in groups is, what are some potential negatives for students when they use translator apps in your classroom? If students are using Google Translate, maybe you see them taking photos, they're using the Google Translate camera, or they're copy-pasting entire text from your slides into ChatGPT to look at them in their first language. What are some possible downsides to that? Okay, so discuss that with someone sitting next to you for about 2 minutes. Sometimes it's just like just folded. They were not connected. I think but they have pages to be And also sometimes the translator also make for example, like like right? But the translation, the mail, yeah, something like that. So sometimes you are lost in translation. So rich student.
It's different.
Yes, that's true. But the thing is like during the EMI international student that and they will also just talk like so then they will sometimes they just so they
对，要不然的话，作业也是要
Yeah, but thank you everyone for discussing. Let's bring it back together and discuss how we share a little bit as a large group. Now, I always love when I look out and I give questions like this, and I see people smiling and laughing. Even if you're talking about a story of a student that frustrates you, right? It really shows that we have a lot of shared experiences, no matter what your subject area is. So I'm curious, maybe if I could get two people to share just a short idea of what is a possible downside, a negative, for students using these types of platforms in class. I promise I won't write you. Yes. Yeah, I'm old, Jim. And so I think the things like the students, if all Taiwanese students, maybe they were not using this, but if there's some international student over there, they will just try to using the app to help, and they try to translate. And but the thing is, sometimes the translation is not okay. For example, like post-war, it means like after the war, right? And in the translation, sometimes they just think that is a mail war.
Post, like post office.
Yeah, something like that. And so it's like they also have less chance to practice their English. So they're just showing to the other international students, this is my answer. But they didn't speak. I think that's a negative effect for them.
Right. You hit on several really good points there, right? Where the thing they see might not be what's really being talked about. And sometimes they rely on it a little bit too heavily. Great. That was a lot of ideas. So I think you've covered for everyone else. Thank you, Rick. All right. So let's go on and let's talk about those assessment principles, okay? This is where we start to talk about the principle of validity, right? Validity is, I don't want to say that of the 7 principles, there's one that's more important than others. But this one, in our current day and age, is the most under threat, very much so because of new technologies. So as we remember from Kelley's presentation, assessment validity is that your assessment is checking what you want to know, that the students know, and is doing so in a fair way. So a valid assessment is one that checks the students and checks them in a fair way. However, as we may see from some students using some of these apps to maybe help them write some papers or an open note test, they can use their iPads or computers. They're getting their answer from somewhere else, somewhere other than their mind. That is where technology interference comes in. This is when technology tools, and mainly the ways that students use them, because I do not believe that ChatGPT is inherently bad. But the way that students engage with it and use it can cause some challenges for your assessment validity. So the way they use these tools is preventing you or distorting the accuracy of your assessment. So it causes your assessment to no longer give you a true view of what is actually going on with the student's learning and knowledge. Some really easy examples of this are when you're giving a math exam, no calculators, and a student is using a calculator, right? I admit I may have tried to do that in my undergraduate. I don't like math courses very much. That is obviously cheating, right? Very obvious. But something that maybe you haven't imagined before is if you're having a discussion question in class, a formative assessment, one with no grade, and you notice your students are simply reading the answer ChatGPT has to the question. It's not really cheating because there's no grade, but in a way, it's distorting your assessment and preventing you from seeing what the student actually thinks. Because they're not reading their answer, they're reading ChatGPT's answer. It's kind of sad, right? You say, oh no, don't read that. Tell me what you think. I want to know what you think. It might hurt you a little bit. Say, am I so boring that you just want to read what the computer has to say? Oh, might hurt your feelings a little bit. So let's take a look at a wider example of what this can look like across a few different phases of class, your presentation as well as an assessment. Now, my mom always told me, never stereotype people. Never put people into groups that aren't really fair. Sorry, Mom, but we're going to stereotype some students today, okay? So we're going to take a look at the story of two types of students. And keep in mind, students go anywhere in between. It can be on the extreme or somewhere in the middle. Just very general stereotypes. Again, I'm sorry, Mom. She's in the United States. Luckily, I'm too far away for her to smack me. Okay, let's take a look at our first student. Our first student is student dog. And maybe you've been to some of my workshops before. I often share these examples of these student stereotypes. Student dog. Now, I'm a dog person, so of course I give a more positive personality to the dog. The dog is really motivated, and they want to get better at everything. They try, even if it's hard. And dog is not afraid to make mistakes, and they know that other people make them too. Sounds like a really great person, an ideal person. Next, we have our cat. Now, if you have a cat, sorry, I do like cats. They don't like me. Cat is happy doing things the easy way. Wants to get everything done very quickly. Cat is afraid to make mistakes and wants to look good all the time. Now, the question I have for you is, do you have students that are like these two stereotypes of students? I see some smiles, so you must have someone that popped into mind. Your dog is that student who sits right in that front seat, always shoots the hand up when you ask a question. Maybe Cat is that student that comes in 15 minutes late and desperately looks for a seat in the back of the classroom. So I'm going to have you talk with a partner, someone sitting next to you. Share, maybe you have a story of a student like one of these two. Okay? Thank you all so much for discussing and sharing with partners. And as I said with our last discussion question, I always see lots of smiles and nodding, which means that we all have students like this, right? So is there maybe one person that could share an example of a student that's like one of these types? Be shy.
No, not me. In my class, only dogs.
Only dogs. Wow. What is your class? Because I want to teach it, right? Right.
Well, my class is in computer lab.
Please.
My class is in computer lab. Most of our hands-on. So I give lecture and they start to work on it. So I do have a lot of surrounded by dogs asking me questions when they are, working on the computers. They run into problems. So I'm busy helping those students. Maybe I kind of, didn't notice or ignore all the cats. So I know no cats in my class. So that's my problem.
Now, just to be clear, we're not saying students are dogs. Not at all. Being 不是, okay? We're not saying that at all. But I think that's a good observation, and that those students will come to you with questions. Because, again, they're not dogs, but just like dogs, they come to people, right? They come seeking some interaction. The cats maybe are kind of shy. Very good. Okay, so let me show you something about how these types of students interact with the class. Now, as I said, I have a background in geology and environmental science. And when I was a student, I very much was a cat student. I did not want to really discuss a whole lot, especially classes that were very new to me. Some classes, my environmental science classes, I was a dog because I love the content. I was really interested. But some of the other classes, like structural geology, right? That's a big mouthful. I was very shy, and I really was afraid of looking bad in front of my classmates. Now, maybe we don't fully have the culture, but Gillian, right? Losing face. That very much exists in the United States as well as here in Taiwan. So in those classes, I was very much a cat. So let me show you a real slide that I pulled from my Google Drive from years ago in a geology class. So I want you to imagine that you are a geology student. First time hearing this content. And don't worry, I will not test you or quiz you. No summative assessments here, okay? So don't worry about the content. Just observe how I teach in my slide design. After I teach you, we're going to look at what the students do and how they use English and technology. And some of you have been to some of my previous workshops, may have seen this example before. Okay? Let's learn about structural geology. Yes. So as we see here on the slide, we see that the plate tectonics is a very important topic when talking about structural geology. The surface of the Earth is split up into many, many different plates. And in between some of the plates, you'll see some trenches. You also see some mountains. And mostly on the seafloor in these areas, you'll see a lot of different changes where there's mid-ocean ridges, thermal vents, anything of that sort. But these plates, they're really moving very slowly, but they're always moving. Kind of like your fingernails. They're always growing at a very slow pace. So right now there's 9 large plates, North American, Eurasian, etc. And some smaller ones, such as the Philippine plate. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, let's go to the next slide. Uh-oh, that was a lot, right? So let's see how our cat responds to that short lecture slide. Cat takes out their phone. Maybe you've seen this in your class before. And they open the Google Translate app. On the Google Translate app, there's a camera. And with the camera, they can take a photo and they translate the whole slide into Chinese, Spanish, German, whatever language they speak. They read the slide once on their phone screen. They type a question in their first language. Again, it could be any language on ChatGPT on something they don't understand. And when you ask, does anyone have any questions? Silence. Totally silent. Let's take a look at our dog. Our dog, on the other hand, they look really closely at the slide and they try to read everything that you put up on the slide. They notice that there's several words, maybe some content vocabulary, and they don't know them. So they type them into Google Translate on their computer to see the meaning. Then they continue reading the slide in English. They listen closely to you, and they write down a question they can ask on a point they don't understand. Pretty big differences in how these students are reacting to your instruction in your materials. So I'm going to ask you one question to start, and then I have one more short discussion question. So first question, just by raise of hand, okay? Do you think that, oh wait, let's do it this way. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, okay? Thumbs up. Do you think that Kat will be able to use their English to respond to the question? Thumbs down, some middle areas, okay? Do you think that dog will be able to use their English to respond? When I say their English, they're speaking their ideas. Mostly all thumbs up for the dog. So let's discuss that a little bit here. Why do you think that these students feel they must or must not use some type of translator to read and answer questions on class content? Okay, so those students, they use it for different purposes. Why do they feel they should or shouldn't use those platforms? 2 minutes to discuss with a partner.
I think you need to choose like that. Otherwise, sometimes no idea. Once you keep popping up and you have no idea about it. But the body was a handy face talk. There's a lot of nice songs. Education talk. Yeah, so I have no idea. But I'm not going to translate. Sometimes I No, just because I feel so I decided but I think the other thing after that I mean I totally can understand what you're check out some instead of like we have yes, true. That's like the school.
And thank you so much for your participation. I really like to see everyone chatting about some of your experiences. So is there maybe one person that has an idea? Think, why did the student go to the platform? Why do they go to ChatGPT? Why do they go to Google Translate? Yes, you look like you have an answer. Yes, what do you think? Why do students feel they need to use these platforms?
I just want to talk about the CAT students. I think that they want to use that
platform is because they like so afraid of making mistake, and also that they want to like comprehend like the whole things, and they want to know all the context, know all the background, so that they can answer the question accurately. So that's why they want to use the translator to like help them to understand all of the things.
Absolutely, yeah. That is an outstanding answer. Thank you for sharing that. They want to feel confident, right? Every student wants to feel confident because the student wants to look good, right? I want to look good. You want to look good. Everybody likes looking good, right? So of course they want to understand 100%, even though it's just the first time they're learning the content. Thank you. So let's talk about a formative assessment then. So a formative assessment could be some form of classroom activity that you do where there's no grade. You just want to see what the students are thinking and what they know about your class content. So in that class, maybe I want them to do a gallery walk, a sort of poster session in class. So I give them the instructions, describe the geology concept in 3 to 5 sentences on a poster. And I expect the students, if they have their phones, their iPads, I expect some of them are going to be using ChatGPT to some extent. Let's see how our 2 students interact with this prompt. Our dog, maybe they're going to check ChatGPT or Google Translate, mostly just for individual words or phrases. But they mostly try and write their ideas. They say, what did I learn today? Okay, I think, that. So they write a very medium-length answer with a few errors, but errors are not a big deal. You just want to know their content. Language is not important right now. And from your perspective, you say, oh, they did okay. They did okay. They did moderately well. But that's quite accurate of their skill. And that's okay, because it's a formative assessment. Our cat, however, they write their answer into Google Translate, or they type this question based on the concept directly in and see an answer. They write a very long answer with no spelling or grammar errors that's copied directly from the website. Womp womp. They appear to do incredibly well. You go, wow, cat, you should be teaching this class. Incredible. But that is not accurate of their skill or their knowledge, right? So in this case here, our assessment validity, it's gone out the window. Our assessment here, our formative assessment, is not valid anymore. So how and why can we cut the interference in our assessments? Because I'm not just here to tell you, we have a problem. I'm here to say, what can we do to help you with some of these problems? So let's talk first about why students use some of these platforms. And as we saw, and as you know, students use them because they want to look good, right? So students have some positive views, of course. It's easy to access. They all have it on their phones, their iPads, a quick enter into their computer. Also, it can be really helpful for students in learning pronunciation. In a chemistry class I observed recently, I showed some of the students how to look up pronunciations of long chemical terms. That's helpful for them. I want them to use that platform. And also, it can give them really increased and quick access to vocabulary. So if there's just one word, they can look it up super fast. They can stick with your lecture. Now, these are just 3 of the positives. There's other positives, but let's look at some of the negatives. So I'm going to present to you some research that was done at Indonesian universities in EMI context. So they surveyed students across, it was several hundred students across EMI courses on how they use some of these platforms, such as Google Translate. So students identify that when they enter things into Google Translate, they don't always even understand what's on the screen in front of them. So here's some quotes. I don't think it always translates the words the right way, and sometimes it makes me more confused. As you shared, maybe they type in the word post-war, meaning after the war, but then they see it's something with the post office, right? That's not related at all. I don't really understand the sentences it produces, and it often uses other words that I don't know. Oh no, they're getting deeper down the hole of being confused, and now they're behind in your lecture. It can also affect students' willingness to engage with your materials and the course content. Think about how many eyes you see when you look out across the room. When I use Google Translate early in the course, so from week 1, from week 2, I become dependent and I can't understand without using it. I become very lazy and I don't try to read English text or understand. So they have sort of a light switch. They turn English on, they turn it off. They focus on what's on their screen. Or Google Translate makes me lazy when studying and listening to lectures. Students also have trouble reproducing content. So when it's time for you to assess them, either formatively or on the exam or presentation, summatively, they can't always do it. The student said, I struggle to pass exams when I always look at the content in my first language. So in lecture, if they're just reading a translation, they're not reading the English material. I feel scared. Now, I expect the students to feel a little bit scared in college. It's perfectly normal, right? But when they say they're scared because of language, not because of content, that causes me some serious concern. And when it's time for exams, I can't remember words, or I don't know how to express my ideas in writing. Maybe it's something they haven't done yet because they've only been doing it in their first language. So where does that really leave us? Now, we know there's a few benefits to using these platforms in class, but just like anything, there's limits to how much we should use. So let me ask you a question. Do you drink coffee or tea? By raise of hands, do you consume caffeine? Do you think you consume too much caffeine? Raise my hand even higher, okay? How do you feel when you drink too much? Feel kind of shaky. Maybe you're laying in your bed at nighttime and you're staring at your ceiling, eyes wide open, can't fall asleep, right? Or in the morning, do you feel like you just can't do anything without first having that cup of tea? Almost like you have an addiction. I'm addicted, I'll admit it. Or trying to do something without it feels terrible or impossible. When I was growing up, my dad had this cup. And when we were eating breakfast together as a family, we knew the first 5 minutes was silent breakfast time. After the first few drinks of coffee, it was talking breakfast time. So we can all see that experience. So what we can do to help these students is we can encourage them to have a growth mindset. Growth is where they seek opportunities, they seek challenges so they can grow their skills, their content, in their language. And one way to reduce interference and provide a growth mindset is to provide nudges and pushes. Now, these are ideas from cognitive psychology that are about your classroom environment and the choices students can make. A nudge is a subtle prompt, something kind of small, maybe something they can't even see. And it encourages people to make a certain choice or perform a certain behavior. But you're not really restricting their options too much. That's a nudge. Often you change the environment or you make the decision something where they tend to choose the more positive action. That's a good thing. We want them to make the better choice. A push, on the other hand, is a little bit more forceful. You're putting them into an environment without a choice. And a mix of these two things in your classroom design can help encourage students to grow and challenge themselves. So, of course, it's true we can't stop students from using them, but there are things we can do to encourage them not to use them. Now, this is a lot, so I want to give you an example of this from our real life, from our society. If you think about cigarette smoking is a really good example of some nudges and pushes, where education, where kids in school learn about the harms of smoking, that nudges them, doesn't really tell them not to smoke. Kids are still going to smoke if they're, a little talpy. It's going to happen. But they know it's bad for their health. So mentally, they'll remember that. They've been nudged just a little bit. Packaging like this, with photos and warnings, also nudge them, right? They say, oh, secondhand smoke can hurt my family member's health. Ooh, that's not very good for me. And as a result of these things, and a push raising the age for purchasing cigarettes, that's a forceful thing. The percent of Taiwanese that smoke has been steadily declining for the last few decades, which is a positive outcome. So if you think about your classroom, if you set it up in a way where they choose to do the thing, you show them what to do, you design your activities in a way that they know how they should interact with it, you're going to see more and more students engaging with your materials and participating in your class. So let me show you what this could look like. Oh, but first, let me tell you about their goals, okay? So these are just a few quotes of what students hope to get out of EMI classes. Now, maybe you have a lot of CAT students, and you read these and you say, Nate, I don't believe it. That's okay. These are surveys of students from NTUT, from Waco the Dog. Some students said that in class, they would like for it to be a time where they get to practice speaking English some more. They also like having opportunities to speak in class. I know, maybe you don't believe it, but real students said these in surveys. I feel motivated to talk when the topics are related to my major and interest. Remember my example? I was much more interested in environmental science because it's something that was interesting to me. Or maybe in your class, some of those students really like computer science. They love that class. But then in a writing class, they're very afraid. That would be too. Also, some other observations from other EMI classes is that EMI class time is often the only opportunity for EMI students to discuss, speak, and write in English. That's one of the unique challenges of EMI, where if a Taiwanese student goes to the United States for a bachelor's degree, everywhere outside they can speak and write in English. But here, most likely, the only English they have is online on YouTube or on some sort of web platform. Students also need English proficiency in our content for their future success. This is the main motivating factor here, is what can we do to help them succeed? So let me show you an example of what they need to succeed. Now, I want you to imagine a dream job, right? Especially for NTUSD students, right? Everybody wants to work at TSMC, right? Who wouldn't? Well, maybe not everybody. Many people want to work at TSMC, right? I want that 8-month bonus, right? Wow. So good, right? So in this particular position, I pulled this from the TSMC website. So this was a real job a few months ago, I saw. Exhibitor for major semiconductor manufacturer. We're seeking a knowledgeable exhibitor to represent our company at a tech conference focused on our business. You'll set up an engaging booth, something like this, demonstrate our products, and interact with industry professionals. Responsibilities include answering technical questions, most likely in English, almost 90% going to be in English, showcasing, so public speaking, showing things, giving presentations, gathering leads, so networking and communicating on a personal basis. Now, this is just the description. I list all of these things down here. So this is just more detail. Again, conduct product demonstrations, engage with attendees from various countries, answer questions, gather contact information, strong knowledge of all the products in English, professional demeanor, and ability to work in a fast-paced environment, and ability to engage and answer questions. Now, if we look at our two students, our dog and our cat, each of these responsibilities, I think our dog can do that. I think our dog can do that. I think our dog can do that. I think our dog can do that, and I'm pretty sure our dog can do every single one of those things. But if we think about the cat, when they get into a workplace like this, they're going to have a lot of challenges, a lot of difficulties, right? Think of this one in particular. Work in a fast-paced environment. Someone says, can you tell me about your 3 nanometer or micro whatever, I don't know anything about semiconductors. Tell me about your smallest chip that you designed. You say, wait a second, I need to check ChatGPT. Oof. Ah, that looks bad, right? Doesn't look good. I don't think you're going to be presenting very much longer. Or someone starts speaking to them and says, oh, I'm from Saudi Arabia. We'd love to invest a lot of money in your company. I say, oh, I'm sorry, I need to check Google Translate. I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. There goes the deal, right? And there probably is also going to go your job, right? So for this success, the students need to be engaged in English. So the cat student is not hopeless though. Turning them into a dog doesn't happen overnight, but using those nudges and pushes through our classroom environment, we can encourage and form them into that type of student that we want. So first off, one thing you can do is tell your students, tell them on day 1, why they should or shouldn't use their phones, when they should or shouldn't use their phones. I want you to try first, even if it's hard. Also stress, I don't care if your English isn't perfect. Mine's not perfect. Even me as a native speaker, I stumble over my words when I'm nervous sometimes, right? Everybody makes mistakes. In fact, mistakes mean you're getting better. help develop a mindset. This is a safe space. You may not have other opportunities, right? 这个机会, right? Maybe you don't have English-speaking friends outside of school. Also, for us as instructors, we can create our materials and build an environment that pushes them towards independence. So, let's look at some applications. Now, one thing to remember with your class content is you got to think about how many times students hear and use this material. Because research shows us, through an author named Paul Nation, very important in linguistics, that students generally need to use, read, speak, and write about a new word or a new concept about 7 times before they're going to remember it. It's quite a few times. So if you think about this word, for example, now it could be a noun, a contract. It's a document. Yeah, you know this. I don't need to teach you this. I'm not here to teach you English. You already speak English very well, right? And also contract, slightly different pronunciation, and it's a verb. Now, if you're a student, business student, and it's your first time hearing this word in class, you might not know which one it is. So it might be a good time to use a translator, right? And that might be okay. But you also need to think about what I said with this research. If the student is hearing the word for the first time in class, how can we expect them to count up to 7? Maybe class is number 1, and when they're studying for exam, number 2, exam is number 3. 3 months, 6 months later, it's gone. But if we do something before class, something in class 2 or 3 times, after class they study in the exam, that's 6. That's much closer to a level that allows them to remember and retain that information. So one way you can increase those exposures is you can provide some readings before class. Now, I understand students may not do the readings. Of course, students don't like to read, right? Especially if it's a lot of reading in a language that they have some challenges with. I get it. But it can really help you count up those times to expose them. So if we look at a reading assignment like this, read chapter 4. I may have some questions. If I'm a student, I might have some questions. I might ask you, teacher, we have 2 textbooks. Which textbook do I read? Chapter 4 is 80 pages long. You want me to read all 80 pages? Right? The students might have a lot of questions, and when they look at it, they're just going to close the book and say, forget about it. Right? So what you can do is you can structure your reading assignment a little bit better. Think about those questions they might ask. What is most important, and what do they really need to know? So you can focus it. Or instead, I write and I send this to the students. Read chapter 4, and I stress what we'll do. Be ready to discuss these questions in class. And I give them a little reading guide where I focus them in on what's most important for our class lecture. Pages 2 through 6. Think about what's the major difference between blah, 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 some geology concepts. Skip to pages 10 through 12. So they don't need to read some of those middle pages because it's not something we're going to discuss in class. Focus on the figure. Look at the picture. The picture is really going to help them a lot to understand the content. And then I ask them another question. When I start my class, I can use these questions as a little quiz. I can reward the students who read it. They say, yes, I did it. Students who didn't read it, they're going to think, uh-oh, I better do the reading next time. I can help change their mindset. So when you're in your class, you can change your material design a little bit. So that way they feel less of an urge to open that Google Translate camera. A few tips: you can trim your large blocks of text, highlight important words, use some more visuals. Just like in my reading, I reference a visual to help them. And I also include some questions so they know where is class going at the end of the slide. It's going to a discussion. And tips for teaching: don't be afraid to wait. I know no student wants to answer first. If it's a little silent, it's a little silent. You're not going to go deaf. It's silent. Okay? Also, use some body gestures and some movements. Don't be afraid to close the distance. Walk up to your students and say, oh, Dr. Sue, I see you're so interested in oceanic subduction. Would you share with us your ideas? Right? Don't be afraid to really get in their face, okay? There's nothing wrong with that at all. So here's our content slide from before. Very overwhelming, right? It doesn't follow those principles I just presented to you. So let's transform this slide into something that's a little bit more manageable for the students. Now, it has the same content as before, but I've made those 4 principal adjustments to make it so a student is less likely to open the translator app on their phone. First thing I did was I trimmed my large essay at the top and I broke it into little pieces. If the student sees one sentence, they say, I can do it, I can read that. If they see a massive paragraph, they'll say, well, where do I even start? That's a lot. So I broke it into pieces. Second, I highlighted the most important information in key terms. So this entire slide is about tectonic plates. And the most important words are diverge, means go apart, and converge, come together. And not only have I highlighted these words, but I've added another visual that demonstrates my key terms. So divergence, and then here would be convergence. So I can reference it directly. They know what I'm talking about. Even if they don't read it, they can listen to me and I can say, this is convergence, this is divergence. They're going to remember that a lot better. And finally, I included a question at the bottom. So students know the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a class discussion. And of course, I'm sure some of the students are going to type this question into the ChatGPT. So you're probably wondering, how can I stop that? Ooh, I've got a suggestion for you. So when you're asking a question or assessing your students, it's your classroom. You are in charge. You are the boss, right? So don't be afraid to tell the students some things, right? Be nice, of course, but don't be afraid to tell them what's what, okay? So something you can do when you do your writing assignments or discussion questions is you can set a specific time when they can use technology. Take a little bit of a backwards, old school approach to this. We don't, just because we have technology doesn't mean we need to use it all the time. So take this example of a writing assignment, right? So if I have this question here, describe the process of divergence by writing it on a poster. That was my formative assessment before. My purpose here is that I want for them to show their knowledge of the topic. And if they make a mistake, that's okay, because I can say, I'm not sure that's right. Let's make some changes to your poster. That's okay. So before, my instructions were write a response in the poster. You can use your notes, 15 minutes. They see one student, they write an okay answer from their idea. Another student writes a massive essay that they copied from ChatGPT. Let's change it. I change it to take 5 minutes to read the question and review your notes and use your phone or computer. You may take notes on your paper or poster. When time is up, you have 10 minutes to finish your poster, write your response. No devices allowed. So they have enough time to check some ideas, gain some confidence, but when it's time to actually produce, the majority of the time when they produce, they can't have access to that device. Who'd have thought? Taking the phones away can work, right? Who'd have thought? So what you might see in this instance is with our original question, as we said before, dog, they just look like they do okay, right? Our cat looks like they do really well. But with our new assignment, dog does the same thing as before. They just check a few things. They still type it in, but they don't have time to copy everything down. They write a medium answer, similar to before, and they do pretty well. It's accurate of their skill. But this student, they really struggle because they were hoping to copy and paste the answer. They haven't taken the time to think about the content yet. And they don't look like they do very well, which is a little more accurate of how they're engaging with the content. So in this way, making this change, we have returned some sense of validity to our assessment. Okay? So I want to ask you one question and then we're going to wrap up our workshop today. So now that I've talked a little bit about how to return some validity to your assessment, or return validity to your students' learning even, I want to know, what is one change to your classroom environment? So the way you teach, the materials you use, or your material design, that could be your assessments or your assignments, that you want to try to reduce technology interference. So again, what is one thing you can do in your class to help your students use technology a little less in your assessments? Okay, discuss with your partner. 2 minutes. Thank you everyone for your discussion. I know the time is short, but I hope to make sure we can find time. So is there maybe one person that could share an idea that you have? Could be a summative assessment, exam, or a presentation. I'm sorry, yes, summative assessment, or it could be a formative assessment, maybe a classroom discussion, group work, anything like that. Any ideas that you have? Remember I said increase wait time, so I'm gonna wait. Yeah. Perhaps the instructor with a sticker of my favorite rapper on their laptop could share.
I don't have class, so
Oh, you don't have class. Okay, never mind. Nice sticker in your laptop, by the way. That's my favorite rapper. All right. Anyone that has any ideas? Dr. Sue? Please share with us.
Our group share is maybe we can reduce our technology, but some other another teacher say use because our department is information department, so we cannot reduce so much.
Right.
But he shared he will use ask student to use ChatGPT for some class, some material, and we also discuss maybe we can reduce more text become to a picture to reduce the configure concept, the loading. Yes.
Yeah. That reminds me of the picture that Kelly showed from your class earlier, where you had students draw pictures of some of the different case studies, right? Now, AI can generate images, but they still have to really think about it, right? If you say no text, image, and I want you to present it. So that can be a way that you push them away from that. Okay, yeah, if you can't leave the technology out, find a way to structure the way your students use it. So make it a way where if they're going to use it, they use it through your terms. Great, thank you. Now, Dr. Sue, because we love you so much, I'm going to put your picture on the slide up here. Okay? Now, if you're interested in some of these ideas that we've shared today about assessments, teaching, material design, etc., and maybe you're not sure where to start, or you have some challenges right now, I have good news for you, because we have consultations. We have one-on-one consultations available. They're totally free. Everybody loves Nyan Fader, am I right? So I would love to see you. Kelly would love to see you in a consultation. Whatever it is, we are here to help you. We will never criticize you. We want to know how we can help you feel comfortable in the classroom. So you can contact our coordinator, Jeffson, who is not in here right now. He's in a meeting online. But we'll send out a link to our consultation sign-up via email after this presentation. Okay, so thank you everyone so much for your time and your participation.
For the wonderful talk, and if you have any question, feel free to contact them, and also get a free consultation.